Welcome to Richard and Greg, a channel dedicated to discussion, debate and argument on a whole array of topics. In our last two videos, we talked to Greg about his credentials, who he is and what experiences can he draw on to debate issues such as politics and international affairs, and we've put links to both of these in the description box below. Now in today's video, we essentially focus on election meddling. After we cover the usual coronavirus update. So let's go to that discussion. Welcome to Richard and Greg. The date is Monday, the 10th of August 2020, and it's 1947, which is 7:47 p.m. GMT +1. Today we're going to talk to Greg, for a brief update on coronavirus figures. Secondly, about the recent headlines published by numerous news outlets stating US election 2020, China, Russia and Iran trying to influence the vote. And US intelligence chiefs have warned that China wishes to sway the American election in favor of Joe Biden and Russia in favor of Donald Trump. And if we have time, Greg's views on what a post-COVID-19 workplace world will look like. So without further ado, and for an update first on COVID-19, Greg, good evening.
Good evening. And I notice we started in 1947 with this broadcast, 1 year after I was born. So COVID is progressing, as one would expect, quite literally. There are, let's talk round figures, 20 million recorded cases and 750,000 deaths so far worldwide. This, however, puts the death rate at somewhere in the region of between 3 and 8 deaths per million in the population. Sorry, per thousand in the population. A bit different to a million. And therefore, to date, we have been extraordinarily fortunate. This is a fairly mild pandemic. Let us face it, everybody with any sense followed the scientific advice, which, as is so often the case, was only a scientific theory based on models where they guessed figures to put into the model. And as so often happens, as with climate change, as with economic development, as with the price of gold, it really doesn't matter. The scientists got it wrong. Their guess was inaccurate, but better safe than sorry. This then gave rise to people castigating America for the manner in which they managed it, praising Sweden for the way in which they managed it, and basically producing a complete load of garbage statistics that misled everybody in the direction they wished to. For instance, the UK is the third highest death rate per million in the world, because we've worked out our figures in one way. San Marino is the highest death rate in the world. Note, rate in the world. That's deaths per million. They have 1,238 people have died per million of population. It'd be quite nice if San Marino had anywhere approaching a million population. Their population is 33,939. So there's a nice meaningless statistics. When you talk of Belgium, which is 851 deaths per million, but they do at least have 11.5 million people. Britain has 685 deaths per million, but that's really quite a high figure. It means that in total, we have 46,526 deaths in Britain, which sounds very high when compared with Sweden, where they only had 5,766. But bearing in mind we had 685 deaths per million, Sweden actually had 610 deaths per million. When you start to take into consideration the size of the population, your figures fundamentally become a nonsense. Brazil has a really high death rate, but it has a much lower deaths per million than 10 other countries, including America and Britain, and for that matter, Sweden. So it is the classic example of how to lie with statistics, especially when you think that no two countries seem to work out their figures in the same manner whatsoever. For instance, if you have had COVID-19 at some time, if you have subsequently died of food poisoning, hiccups, or car accident, you are registered as having died of COVID because you died during the COVID period having had COVID. So, as you can see, those figures tell us very little. The only thing we can really learn from these figures is that you cannot rely on scientific data because scientists draw their own decision as to what data to put into their models. Net result, they come out with completely different answers. There is no doubt that America has somewhat bungled many aspects of dealing with this virus. But then again, the UK bungled it. In some ways, we built a number of costly, very large Nightingale hospitals, and then largely we failed to use them, and we're now dismantling them, when in fact we should have used much smaller models for Nightingale hospitals and handed the job to the qualified people to do it, namely county council, health and safety officers, to implement local Nightingale wards in utilising properties already available to them, namely leisure centres and schools, which would have fitted the bill, been local to the area, etc., rather than immense wards in the centres of towns, 4,000 beds in one in London, slap bang in the middle of the city, making delivery to it, travel to and from it, etc., something of a nightmare, which probably explains why it was virtually unused. We should have put all COVID cases into these units, not involved our hospitals at all, because hospitals are wonderful places for viruses to spread, because viruses are opportunist and take the weakest target. But we continue, largely in dispute as to whether we should open schools, close schools, manage education from home, run schools normally, and that's just schools. Business, it has the same dilemmas, and so does commerce in general. I live on the border between England and Wales. In Wales, you can now shop and wander around any shop with no problem at all, having travelled any distance to it. You can do it without directions. You're requested to social distance. Very few people bother, whereas in England, we are obliged to wear masks in all public enclosed places, which includes shops and stores. Cafes are open, but you must wear a mask when you enter. You must register where you are from, your address and access, so that if there is an outbreak amongst the people who were there at the same time, you can be contacted. You are shown to your table, which is a distance away from the next table, and you can have a generally pretty tedious time visiting restaurants and cafes. Whereas in Wales, the pubs are open and everybody seems to ignore masks, social distancing, and everything else. I guess the only good thing about the coronavirus, COVID-19, has been that now that Wetherspoons have been closed for several months, when you go in there, the carpets are dry, which is a bit of a bonus. But then again, you're bound to be passing people. Most of the people serving are not wearing masks. People handling food, you see them in the distance, handling the food for service, not wearing masks. It's a total bloody muddle.
Well, Greg, thank you for that. I'm sure the owner of Wetherspoons will not really appreciate that comment, but there we go. Election interference. China, Russia, or any other country. What are your thoughts? How will they do it? And do you think they will be successful?
My thoughts are, why is anybody surprised? Let's bring it to a much more local level. And let's talk in terms of the American election. Have you noticed that Joe Biden's team are trying to interfere with the publicity of Donald Trump's team? Has it occurred to you that Donald Trump's clamorings and self-promotion is designed to interfere with the potential success of Joe Biden? I thought that was what elections were all about. Now, of course, people are interfering. Britain has had the European Union interfering with its elections for 50 years now. Interference to get what was in their best interest. At the moment, we have the European Union desperately trying to sabotage our governments, undertaking to our people in response to the democratic vote that we wish to leave on certain terms, and yet they are interfering with what's happening by trying to insist that to maintain a level playing field, the French, the Spanish, et al. Must be entitled to fish and catch as much fish as they wish in British waters. I think they might have something to say if we respond and say, you want to steal our fish? Fair enough. We want to own Renault, Seat, and BMW in exchange. But that is exactly what France particularly is trying to do to Britain. But they get very upset when we refuse. People interfere with elections. It is in China's interest to have Joe Biden as president of America because Trump is being aggressively anti-China. I tend to agree with Trump on this particular issue, and I'm very pleased to see the British government has also spoken out with a heavy level of censure of the obscene manner in which China is behaving. We would like to interfere in their elections, though it wouldn't much help because they're not democratic elections. They have a dictatorship that does what the hell it likes, regardless of international agreements, regardless of signed treaties, and in complete indifference to what is in the best interest of the people. The people are merely there to make the government function how the dictatorship wishes it to. Russia, on the other hand, has much the same system, but it wishes to interfere in the American elections to get Donald Trump in rather than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is not quite as friendly towards Russia and is more friendly towards China, which doesn't suit Russia. Why is anybody surprised that people interfere with other people's elections? They will do it overtly, they will do it clandestinely, they will put money into this side, that side, or the other, or they will merely produce suitable propaganda and use social networking and various bots and clever scams to put out their point of view to support whichever candidate they are hoping will win. That's how elections work. They always have throughout history. It's just that there are more and more complex ways in which it can be done nowadays, particularly with the internet. But this goes on and always has done. 1 minute we have the population of America saying that Bill Gates is interfering with this, that, or the other. The next minute they're complaining because he isn't. Jeff Bezos has just decided that, recently decided that it's in his financial interest to invest 10 billion of the profits of Amazon that he has paid himself in supporting various aspects of climate change. Well, there's tremendous profits to be made out of spurious techniques like wind turbines, electric cars, solar panels. There is a fortune to be made. The fact that none of them make any sense whatsoever is a detail. If there's money to be made at it, it's worth investing 10 billion if you happen to have 180 billion in your bank account. People interfere for profit, for gain, or for power, worldwide or locally.
Well, Greg, thank you for that. You mentioned electric cars and solar panels. And ironically, I read a post yesterday, I think it was, certainly over the weekend, which stated that for those wishing to see silver prices rise even further, and they're already rising quite considerably, then they should vote for Joe Biden, because Joe Biden will push or be forced to push the Green New Deal. Therefore, there will be more investment into the likes of solar power panels and electric cars, all of which use silver. So silver stackers, Biden's the answer.
All a complete nonsense. It's gambling on which batty idea actually gets to sway the day. Electric cars are absolutely barking mad. 2 days ago at the supermarket, I was parked next to a Tesla, what was it called? A Nova X or something? I looked it up when I got home. It varied, dependent on which whistles and bells you glued onto it, from £85,000 to £110,000. It was as ugly as sin. I personally thought it was a ridiculous vehicle, the ultimate Chelsea tractor. But when you looked it up, it had a total range on its brand new batteries. What that would deliver after the batteries had been in use for a year or so, I've no idea. On these brand new batteries, it has a total range of 240 miles. So that means that unlike a petrol car or a diesel car, living where I do, I could not go to London and come home on the same day. I couldn't go on business, I couldn't go to the theatre, and I might well have difficulty going for the weekend. What, for £100,000? I could get somebody to take me there and back in a chauffeur-driven roller. Granted, it wouldn't be a patch on the old rollers now that it's made overseas. It probably uses the same ashtrays and fittings as the Mondeo, like Jaguar. But I think my point is made. The car, the Tesla, uses electric, which means it's using rare earth commodities mined in the main in the Congo by slave labor. Children from the age of 6 or 7 upwards paid an absolute pittance with no health and safety regime. Furthermore, the batteries, nobody knows how long they'll last. And on top of that, they're non-recyclable and they constitute toxic waste. So what is going to be the cost of disposing of these vehicles? Well, of the batteries. And much of the bodywork of a modern car isn't even metal that can be melted down and reused. It's plastic in one form or another. We're going backwards at a huge rate of knots in the name of progress.
Well, thank you, Greg. I think you've made your position very clear on that. I can't comment any further, really.
Elon Musk had the right idea. He has actually worked out how to dispose of Tesla cars. You may have noted that he put one in a rocket and fired it into space.
And on that note, we shall fire into space too. Greg, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if so, kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of our videos as and when they are published. And also in the description box below, we place links to certain books, articles, and programs which you may find of benefit, and for which we will receive a small commission should you purchase through our link. And this will help support our channel and to enable us to develop it further.